A listener asked me Saturday night if I believe that Bear Bachmeier should be more heavily involved in the Heisman Trophy conversation. I said no. In retrospect, I was dead wrong, and Bear absolutely should be in the running.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, is Bear Bachmeier supposed to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation? Well, the numbers, they don't lie, and they say yes, and we'll get into that. We'll also talk about the next big conversation that BYU boosters may have to have, and that is regarding Kalani Sitake, because this upcoming coaching cycle could be one for the ages, and they better pull out those pocketbooks because you can guarantee Kalani Sitake is going to be targeted. We'll talk about that as well, and we'll finish up today's show talking about something BYU failed to address this past offseason that has come home to roost, and that is the running back position and why their failure to address it in the offseason has now hurt this program and their chances of maybe finishing this season undefeated. We'll get into all of that ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so at the outset of this conversation, those of you who watched the postcast on Saturday Night Live or watched it in retrospect heard me utter the words that I didn't believe that Bear Bachmeier should be in the Heisman Trophy conversation because I didn't think his stats matched up. Now, that was me speaking off the cuff in the moment, and I was of the belief that maybe his numbers didn't match some of the other star players in college football right now. Well, there was a tweet that came out a couple of days ago, I think now, from Joe Wheat, obviously a BYU super fan, one of the three hosts of the BYU Hype Train podcast, which, by the way, is a great product, unsolicited on that front, by the way. Joe and the guys do a great job with the Hype Train podcast. He put out this tweet because Diego Pavia, the star quarterback for Vanderbilt, has been essentially unabashed in saying that he wants to win the Heisman Trophy, as would any player in college football. It is the single highest honor a college football player individually can win. That is absolutely, I think, every young man's dream that plays college football is to win the Heisman Trophy. And Diego Pavia, he wants to win it. Well, Joey put this tweet out that had me kind of running backwards to reel those words I said on Saturday night back into my mouth, which I can't do, obviously. But he pointed this out. Diego Pavia this season so far has 2,156 total yards, 20 total touchdowns, and 5 turnovers. Well, how does that compare with Bear Bachmeier? Well, as he points out, Bear Bachmeier, 2,101 total yards, 20 total touchdowns, and 3 turnovers. So if you're doing the math, he has 55 less total yards. He has the same amount of total touchdowns as Diego Pavia, and actually has 2 fewer turnovers. Now, you're probably wondering, well, where is Diego Pavia in terms of the overall Heisman Trophy odds? Well, our friends over at FanDuel, strong partner of ours here on Locked On Cougars and the Locked On Podcast Network, have Diego Pavia as the 5th best odds to win the Heisman Trophy this season with plus 850 odds. The top 5 candidates in order: Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, the quarterback; Ty Simpson from Alabama, also a quarterback; Julian Sayin, star quarterback for Ohio State; and Marcel Reed from Texas A&M. All of them have great odds to win this award, led by Mendoza at plus 260. Well, if you scroll down on our odds from our friends over at FanDuel, you will come to a list where you get into the 20,000, plus 20,000 range, and that is where our good friend Bear Bachmeier checks in. Well, you're probably wondering, okay, Jake, well, you took one quarterback. How does he match up with these other quarterbacks out there? Well, Fernando Mendoza, for example, he has 1,900 passing yards and about 200 rushing yards, so right in the same realm overall yardage as Bear Bachmeier, with a grand total of 27 touchdowns against 3 interceptions. So he has a few more touchdowns, obviously 7 more than Bear Bachmeier. Then you look at Ty Simpson. He's got 2,184 passing yards and just 79 yards rushing. He has 22 total touchdowns against 1 interception. Very similar numbers. Julian Sayin, 1,872 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a grand total of 17 yards with 0 touchdowns rushing. All of those quarterbacks who I just mentioned are on the short list, if not the shortest of lists, to win the Heisman Trophy. And if Bear Bachmeier, having led BYU to an 8-0 record, a top 10 national ranking at this point in the season, Why in the world is Bear Bachmeier not more heavily involved in the Heisman Trophy conversation? I was dead wrong to say I didn't believe that he stacked up. Bear Bachmeier's stats stand right there with everybody's across college football right now at this juncture. The final month of this season in this Heisman Trophy race is going to be one for the ages because there is no consensus odds-on favorite to win this Heisman Trophy. Plus 260 odds for Fernando Mendoza still makes him very capable of falling off and another person supplanting him in that Heisman Trophy conversation. And there's no reason to believe that Bear Bachmeier could not enter that conversation. Let's say if BYU goes to Texas Tech next week and notches another big win. If BYU makes a run here in the final stanza of this season with 4 games to go in the regular season, and heck, they're 11-1 going to the Big 12 title game, or heaven forbid 12-0 and headed to the Big 12 title game, why wouldn't Bear Bachmeier be more in that conversation? In fact, we may have been doing him a disservice without actually mentioning him for this. And some of you, I'm sure, are going to hop in my comments saying, whoa, Jake, don't be pumping this up. Don't be putting things on him that doesn't need to be on him. I don't think I'm putting anything on him. He has been absolutely remarkable. We talked yesterday about how he almost single-handedly willed BYU to a victory, losing his star running back, who's been maybe the main engine that made BYU go this season. That game against Iowa State, against a hyper-aggressive defense, was put on his arm, and all he did was put BYU on his back and lead them to victory. Now, that may be a blessing and a curse because the other 7 games before that, it's been the running game that's really powered BYU's offense to the success they've had. So maybe that's why Bear Bachmeier has not been more heavily in these conversations. But if LJ Martin, heaven forbid, is out for any significant period of time going forward here, that offense, the Bear Raid, as I and others are calling it on social media, that is going to become a bigger conversation piece and could, I will say, using that as the word there to caution you, could power Bear Bachmeier's name more heavily into the Heisman Trophy conversation, because maybe, just maybe, we have been doing a disservice by ignoring him as a potential winner of this award. You want to talk about a remarkable story to become a guy who showed up at BYU in June, won a starting quarterback job midway through training camp, and if he has the run that BYU fans are hoping that they have down the stretch here, man, what a story it would be if he's a true freshman, leads BYU to one of the all-time seasons in program history, and then collects hardware that only one other individual in BYU football history has hoisted. That is Ty Detmer and the Heisman Trophy. What a story it could be, and it's one to monitor. I'm just saying, keep it on your radar because the stats, they do not lie. If guys like Diego Pavia, Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Julian Sayin, some of the who's who of quarterbacks in college football are on that short list, and Bear Bachmeier's numbers compare very, very favorably with them, why shouldn't he be more heavily in that chatter? All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about another guy who could find himself in the headlines, and that's BYU head coach Kalani Sitake. We are seeing record buyouts being paid by top-tier programs. The coaching carousel is going to unfold later on. About this time is going to, when it starts to spin a little bit, because you start seeing hires in November, especially with the early signing window and all that comes up very, very quickly. Well, as the coaching carousel starts to spin, BYU is going to have to, maybe fork over some extra money. Those BYU boosters who are as deep pocket as they are rumored to be may have to pull those pocketbooks once again. We'll explain why coming up next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than with our friends at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand you're watching in said game, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks and literally everything else outside of that, whether it's over-unders, player props. I don't care what you're into. The best part is you can combine your bets into same-game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps everything more and every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push trying to get the victory, like the Utah Jazz last night with Lauri Markkanen going for a 50-burger. What an incredible performance that was. And those odds you probably could have gotten for him going over 50 probably were pretty favorable. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. As simple as that. Put down $5 on a bet. If it wins, $300 using your account. And it's all courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with our friends over at FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of your patronage and your support of the podcast. Absolutely remarkable the growth we have seen this year in particular and this football season in particular. So thank you to all of you who are everydayers, as we like to say here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is, of course, your team every day. All right, so some of you probably saw the headlines a few weeks back that Curt Cignetti, who has become a hot topic in the college football universe because he's propelled Indiana, a perennial doormat, into being the number 2 team in the entire country. Well, there was some thought that he may be pursued by the likes of Penn State because, Penn State's got deep pockets and they just fired James Franklin because he couldn't win the proverbial big game and get them over the hump to win a national title. Well, they're trying to find an option for that, and Curt Cignetti, with what he's done at Indiana, has completely flipped the script. Well, if you look at Curt Cignetti's run over the past season and now 2/3 at Indiana University, he has gone 19-2 in the last 21 games. So a guy who just went 19-2 over the past season and a half has now cashed into the tune of getting $93 million through November 30th, 2033. He's going to be paid at approximately $11.6 million annually by Indiana, and the deal is fully guaranteed. You know who else has gone 19-2 over the past season and change? Oh, yes. One Kalani Sitake. Now, I will also add this caveat. Kalani Sitake loves, and I mean Loves, capitalized, underlined, boldface font. He loves Brigham Young University. He has grown up his entire life being a fan of the university, playing for Lavelle Edwards, and working in his coaching career with the whole goal of becoming the head coach of BYU. I say all of that because this coaching carousel in the aftermath of Brian Kelly getting fired and being paid it's actually not the highest buyout ever because it was Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, but the second highest buyout ever at $54 million. I think the number was $169 million of being paid in buyouts by college football programs to coaches being fired already this season. That includes guys like Billy Napier at Florida, James Franklin at Penn State, etc., and obviously including now Brian Kelly at LSU. Those are premier jobs, and the guys who get those jobs are going to be paid a significant amount of money, and the boosters of said universities are going to be willing to foot some pretty hefty bills to pay the buyouts and obviously hire the next head coach. Why am I talking about all of this, and why am I involving Kalani Sitake in this conversation? Well, I'm just saying, there is a number out there that I think any of us probably have a number in our head. If somebody came to us in our job, whether it's me in sports media, you doing whatever you do in your day job, that they said, we'll give you this amount of money, you would say, thank you to your current employer and say, where do I sign? Let's do this thing. I'm not saying that Kalani Sitake is looking to leave BYU, but BYU better be ready to back up the Brinks truck to make sure that he is comfortable at BYU. Do I believe that BYU is going to be willing to fork over north of $10 million for their head coach? I don't know, but I'm telling you, at the level that Kalani Sitake is winning at right now, that's the going rate, everybody. I think Kalani would absolutely take less to be happy, comfortable, and doing what he's doing at BYU because, as I said, he loves what he's doing at Brigham Young University. But, man, money talks, and it talks in a big way. Could some program out there, I'm not saying that LSU is going to do it. I'm not saying that Florida is going to do it. I'm not saying that Penn State's going to do it. Could a program like a UCLA get some booster who has got just incredibly deep pockets say, we want Kalani Sitake, hand him a blank check and tell him to name his price? That, in theory, could be the case. But the nice part is on BYU side of things is BYU's got boosters, and I'm talking boosters plural, that are very capable of matching, if not outdoing, a lot of the booster groups around this country. I think that's kind of the unwritten thing about BYU right now, and it's becoming more and more a conversation, it feels like, as time goes along. The BYU's booster base and the tech million and billionaires that have come out of Brigham Young University that want to turn around and have helped BYU and want to continue to help the BYU athletic department, in particular football and basketball, speaking of men's basketball, to become premier programs. Because if you missed it, BYU is the only program in the only athletics program in the entire country right now that has its football and men's basketball teams ranked inside the top 10 in the AP polls. pretty remarkable what BYU is doing right now. And you can guarantee that there are athletic directors, university presidents, and boosters/booster groups out there nationally that are looking at Provo, Utah and saying, how do we get ourselves some of that? I don't think Kalani Sitake is looking to leave BYU. Let me be very clear. I'm not reporting that Kalani Sitake has got wandering eyes, but UCLA has already been mentioned as a place for him to potentially land this offseason. I'm going to guarantee that there are going to be other jobs as a result of this coaching carousel starting to spin. They're going to take jobs at other universities that open up positions that the conversation will inevitably turn to say, hey, is Kalani Sitake happy being in Provo, Utah? Does he want to try something new? He spent a decade in Provo. Maybe he wants his next challenge. Those conversations have already taken place, as I mentioned, with the UCLA Bruins, and they will only continue throughout this upcoming coaching carousel. This carousel, the way it's going to spin, it feels like could be one for the ages. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars could change hands in terms of contracts being signed between buyouts, obviously guys leaving for new jobs, and the whole other side of it with regards to finding new coaches and getting them installed in these programs. It spins every year, but this one in particular, with how much money has been already doled out and the premier jobs that are open, just be aware that Kalani Sitake's name is going to be invoked a lot in terms of potential guys who could land at other programs. But I will also reiterate the fact that I believe that BYU's booster base, its university leadership, and everybody involved is going to do their absolute darndest to make sure that Kalani Sitake feels the love and that he is comfortable and well taken care of in Provo, Utah, and he's going to continue as BYU's head coach. You do not cast aside the success that he has had, in particular, these past 2 seasons. He has started 8-0 in 2 seasons in a row. It's never happened in program history. In fact, starting 8-0, I think, is 5 total times in BYU football history. We are watching some of the best football success literally ever in BYU history. Why would you want to go and screw that up? And I'm talking from Kalani Sitake's side of thing, and I'm also talking from the university side of thing as well as boosters. The conversations are going to come up. There are going to be people who I said are going to invoke Kalani Sitake's name, but I have got mad respect for BYU's boosters who have already shown their willingness to fork over hefty money to help BYU become a force in NIL, to help them build what they've done in terms of the Built for Life stuff that they've done in terms of off the field, making sure that the $20.5 million revenue share has been fully funded. They have footed the bill time and time again. And they very well may have to foot the bill once again to make sure that BYU's head man, he may not want $93 million like Curt Cignetti, but I'm telling you, he deserves much more than he's getting right now. I'll just say that. I don't know what the number is going to be. I don't think it'll be $11 million. I'm sure he'd like $11 million, but I know that Kalani Sitake loves and respects BYU enough to say, hey, I know what we're trying to do here. Here's what I need, and I'm yours for life. That's what I hope the conversation comes to, and I hope that everybody involved makes sure it gets done, because you do not, I reiterate, you do not want to see Kalani Sitake walk out that door, because he's absolutely built a Leviathan with BYU football, and you cannot let that leave at this juncture. All right, we'll finish up today's show. Coming up next, talking a little bit about BYU football in addition to, a lot of the talk about speculation on Heisman trophies and Kalani Sitake's status. Well, there is one thing that could sink BYU quicker than anything this season, and that is a decimated running back room. I have harbored some thoughts about why BYU did not address this more heavily in the offseason. I know a number of you who I have had conversations with about this topic have also expressed your thoughts. We'll talk about maybe why BYU should have done more in this offseason to address these concerns, and we'll finish up today's show next on that note right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and of course, it is absolutely rocking and rolling. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout, and a whole litany of other issues. That's why I want you guys to use Game Time. It is the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. It's my favorite feature about our friends over at Game Time. That makes it super simple. You can see exactly what your view from your seat will be before you buy. And they also have zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big along the way. And honestly, it's the fastest, cheapest, and most least stressful way to buy tickets that I have found. So I want you guys to take a guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply against the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Want to encourage you guys, if you have not done so already, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU football and basketball that I am hearing, and it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. It's got much more direct than that. The best part is you can fire back with thoughts. You only have great conversations in the Insiders Group. If you want to be a part of it, you get a 14-day free trial before you charge a single penny. It's just $5 a month to be a part of the group. So sign up today. The link in the show notes below, or reach out to us and we'll get you squared away as a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. BYU running backs are in a bad way right now. Now, I say that with also adding the caveat, we do not know the status of LJ Martin right now, and probably will not know it ultimately until next Wednesday when the first player availability report comes out for BYU ahead of their game against Texas A&M. I am praying to high heavens that he is okay and he's capable of playing against Texas Tech, not A&M. I say Texas A&M. Wow, I've got the Aggies on the brain, but apologies. Against Texas Tech, I am hoping he's available because BYU, if they want to continue this marvelous run they're on, you need to have your bell cow running back available because behind him, you've got guys with injuries. Sione Moa has been dealing with compartment syndrome. I don't mind putting that out there because it's out there on social media. And who knows if and when he comes back. The hope is he's going to come back at some point this season, as people like Spencer Linton have speculated online about on social media, but that remains very much up in the air. Preston Rex left this past game injured after being BYU's main running back for a vast majority of that game. Enoch Nawahine came in. I also saw some spot duty from Jofeza Demuni. So if you're keeping track at home, BYU in theory is down its starting, backup, and third string running back. If you think that LJ Martin goes down, Sione Moa has been out for a significant period of time, and Preston Rex left this game against Iowa State injured. I have long harbored a concern that why BYU didn't bring in another running back in the transfer portal or to just bring in general this past offseason. I think it was a mistake in retrospect because if I know that BYU has red flags with each one of these running backs with regards to health status, and I can see that, you can guarantee that BYU coaches either A, are aware, B, were aware, or C, should have been aware that there are red flags with their health status. LJ Martin has been injured every season has been at BYU. Sione Moa, the same thing. We have seen Preston Rex take to this position, but he missed all last year with a torn ACL. I look at this and say, why didn't Harvey Unga, Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick, TJ Woods as the run game coordinator, why didn't they look at this and say, hey, maybe, just maybe, we need to bring in an extra body at running back? And I know some of you are probably screaming right now, well, they tried to get Hinckley Ropati back, Jake. Okay, you want to talk about another running back who's had injury concerns? Hinckley Ropati tore his ACL the first week he showed up in Provo as a junior college transfer way back, I think it was in 2020. He has ground his way through multiple injuries during his BYU career, and he was hopeful of getting a hardship waiver to play this season, but even he has that same red flag of being injury prone. I believe that BYU may have hosed themselves if LJ Martin is out long term, that they may find themselves in a bad way because they essentially thought, hey, we can get by with what we've got here at running back. And I know that the numbers in terms of looking at the bodies on the roster, especially when BYU at one point was facing the prospect of having to cut down from a 123-man roster to a 105-man roster, then finding out that the judge, Claudia Wilkin, with that whole House settlement, grandfathered in every player that BYU potentially was going to cut. Maybe the conversation was we just don't have space to bring a guy in. But I'm telling you, looking at it from this side of it, now 8 games deep into the season, and like I said, maybe your top 3 running backs are currently on the shelf, it looks like a major whiff for BYU not to have brought in a running back. And I'm not trying to be uber critical of BYU because they're 8-0. Life is pretty good in Provo, but BYU once again entered the Iowa State game with one of the best rushing attacks in the entire country. It was 10th in the country at 233 yards. They ham and egged it to get 103 yards against Iowa State, mainly led, once again, by the Bear Raid himself, Bear Bachmeier, leading BYU in rushing. I don't want to see Bear Bachmeier be BYU's leading rusher the rest of the season, because that is going to expose him to a whole multitude more hits that I frankly am concerned that one or two more may break this young man. He's built like a centaur, as Bruce Barnum called him, but even a centaur has his limits. And I'm concerned that if he is going to be truly the running the Bear Raid offense, if it doesn't have a running back that is able to kind of shoulder the load and keep defenses honest, guess what? What they're going to do is going to say, find number 47, key on him, and that's what we're going to have to slow BYU down, is slow him down. Getting JoJo Phillips back, that will absolutely help BYU, because as I understand, he's been practicing. Aaron Roderick said it himself this past week, and the hope is he's available for Texas Tech. Well, that adds another weapon in the passing game that ultimately should help BYU have a more potent passing attack. But once again, why didn't BYU kind of recognize, or maybe they willfully just looked at it and said the numbers don't bear out, that we can bring a guy in? But I'm telling you, it feels like a major mistake on BYU's end to have not considered bringing in another running back. I'm not saying you need to go out and break the bank NIL-wise to bring in a top-tier running back. I'm just talking about find a guy who got decent production, has got a track record of staying healthy, and bring him in simply as a depth piece. Because right now, you could use that type of a guy, couldn't you? So it's a very, very touchy conversation, and I'm sure I'm going to some people who are going to be upset that I'm even discussing it. But trust me, I know those of you who are out there that I've had this conversation with, you've been as frustrated as I am, and I know one of you in particular, you know who you are, who has been expressing this to me. I'm talking for months now. They mentioned this back to me in March. I think even as far back maybe as January, saying, why aren't they looking more at a running back in the portal, Jake? And this individual, their track record is pretty impeccable, because they've got some very, very good takes on things that they observe from the BYU side of things that have borne out to be true over time. That individual, I think, has been accurate for months now. And while I may have kind of deflected and say, hey, they're gonna make do with what they've had and what they have on the roster, well, I'm wrong. That person was right. And BYU, yeah, I think they made a mistake in not considering bringing in a running back. As I said, you're not trying to go out there and get a top tier running back on the transfer portal market, because they cost a lot of money, and BYU probably had already used the allotment it had for NIL at that point. But you could go out there and find somebody maybe from a lower level, let's say a Weber State level type running back, bring them in and let them kind of work within the framework of this offense. And had you had a player like that at this juncture, maybe, just maybe, the running back position would be better suited than it is right now. Because I don't see what Enoch Nawahine is going to offer to BYU in the rushing attack. He's proven not to be all that effective in his limited playing time as a BYU Cougar. Maybe with a larger dose, maybe he proves me wrong. Maybe Jovessa Demouni is the answer, but he's essentially been in the doghouse since he fumbled a few games back. Maybe it is Logan Payne, who is a former standout running back at Weber High School, who's a walk-on with this program, that gets his first crack at it. I don't know. But BYU has to find an option at running back and find a way to produce something from that position if LJ Martin, Sione Moa, and or Preston Rex are unavailable for however long. It's not a good situation BYU finds itself in. And if they have an ineffective rushing attack, it could also find themselves fighting even more upstream to win games down the stretch here. And once again, it feels like there may have been a bit of a mistake in not considering bringing in another running back in the portal. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, and I hope I am, but it's something I felt like I needed to get off my chest and talk a little bit about in light of LJ Martin going down on Saturday. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, please subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends. Should have done this earlier. If you're watching this on YouTube and got to this point, hit that thumbs up icon. Simple as that. It likes the show, helps the algorithm, and obviously helps us build this audience even more than you already have. But as always, thank you for your support of the podcast. Please go check out Locked On Big 12. If you don't already, check out what Drake's got to say on Locked On Big 12 today, because he's absolutely killing it over there with the Locked On Big 12 podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And come back tomorrow and be an everydayer with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.